Yeah, there we go. Okay. So thank you for meeting with us today. And so I wanted to talk about the financial modeling session yesterday. What do you think was the main message from the financial modeling session yesterday?
So yesterday we met with Chris Grange, who's interestingly from the he's the Chief Financial Officer of the university, which means he's not college level, he's at the executive level. His advice works on figures that go to and come out of the Chancellery itself. So these are the official figures. Main message from yesterday, several good messages. First message was, as we predicted, the numbers are different from any other numbers we've seen. But there were a couple of very interesting qualitative points that Chris made. And I say qualitative because, being a financial session, there were a lot of numbers involved. But leaving the numbers for later, qualitatively, he pointed out that whatever we do now, for good, for bad, cost cutting, cost saving, whatever we do now, there will be another crisis at the end of 2018. Since at the moment, the university executive has committed to supporting languages at the university until 2018. There's a special supply of money that goes towards language support. That fund of money has been running for at least 10 years. We've checked the figures with McComas Taylor. And only in the last 3 years did anyone make any noise about it maybe not being a regular ongoing commitment. If, these are Chris Grange's reports, if in 2019 that support is not continued, then we go through all of this again. We have a fresh financial crisis. The university executive commits $2.4 million per year towards language support. If that's cut, once again, the rug is drawn out. So, big point number one, there's a sum of money which, if we don't discuss this and resolve this now, we'll just have to go through this whole crisis again when we're all even more tired. The second point was a very interesting one. There's another sum of 2.4 million which emerges in the school's finances, and that's the levy that the college imposes on the school. Each year the school, CHL, is spending $2.4 million for college support. It's not clear how the sum of $2.4 million is arrived at. It's not clear whether that, as a percentage of CHL income, is compatible with income elsewhere. Chris Grange couldn't answer these figures because there is no centralized system for college levies. That's organized college by college, and that information hasn't been forthcoming from our college dean. But when asked whether this sum was the right sum, he was quite unambiguous when he mentioned that the College of Asia and Pacific has one of the highest levies across campus. It has one of the highest percentages of wages spent on non-academic positions. Currently, 25% of wages in the College of Asia and Pacific are not academic wages. Now, you have to have support people or the system collapses. I could not do my job. No students could get through enrollment process without having someone to say, fill this form, go to that page. We need some of that. But 25% is a rather high percent. So the two, I think, take-home qualitative points from the presentation yesterday were, firstly, the language subsidy is essential, and we have to discuss this now and not delay 2 more years. Secondly, CHL spends a lot of money in supporting the college. Our college, the College of Asia and Pacific, spends a very high percentage of income on non-academic salaries. In other words, not generating knowledge, not disseminating knowledge. And in Chris's words, this is too much.
And these were presented yesterday very much as non-negotiable expenses for us.
No, I'd have to deny that. These were presented as things that Chris Grange is not in control of. This is something the university executive is not controlling. These are things that have to be resolved at a college level. Chris, I think, walked a very careful line saying, it's my job to do this at the university level. I can't make academic decisions, says Chris, because he's not an academic. I can't make college decisions because I'm not in the college. There is no standardized system for how much colleges should spend on support staff, on administration. There is no standardized formula for how much schools should be taxed. That's a college question. This conversation has not been happening in our college. Chris, I think, sensibly distanced himself from this issue, because it's not, at this moment, it's not a university executive decision. That's been devolved to college responsibility. For him, there is no negotiation because it's not his, he has no control over it. For our side, there should be negotiation. Many people have been saying we need to see hard data on why we're spending so much money and what we're getting from it. That conversation has not been forthcoming from the Dean.
So what sort of information do you think was missing from the presentation yesterday? What else would we have liked to see being talked about?
If we're talking about the School of Culture, History and Language, and we're talking about the financial situation we're in, obviously we need to know what's happening at the college level as well as the university level. Chris Grange gave us the summary figures. We saw a one-line income, one-line expenditure. Difference between those tells whether you're going up or going down. Great. What is the income? Where does it come from? What are the expenditures? What are we spending money on? These are questions which Chris cannot answer. These are college-level questions. What would have been lovely a month ago would be to have this presentation at a college level with details. Chris mentioned there are some obvious strategies we need to engage with, but he can't tell us them because he's not a college person. Strategies like, we've seen historically over the last 5 years decreasing student numbers, especially in the last year or two. Rather obviously, the decrease in student numbers has been since the college removed the ability of the School of Culture, History and Language to propose courses. During a review process, you're not allowed to change things too much. A review process is a few months long. This review process has been running for 18 months, and in 18 months, not a single new course has been approved and posted. Obviously, that impacts on student numbers. Other things which Chris can't tell us, because he's a chief financial officer in the Chancellery, are things like, why don't you have a master's program? Now, that's a valid question. There should be a master's program. That's both highly educational, very good for PR, and it generates income. There is a Masters of Asia Pacific Studies. It was created by the School of Culture, History and Language, and it was very successful. High approval ratings, everyone loved it, so good that the college took it away from the School of Culture, History and Language. That's why there's no master's program. So there are a number of things which Chris cannot address. They should not have been part of his presentation because they're college problems, not university finance problems. I think his presentation, given his job and his brief, which is what does the Chancellery see as happening with CHL, it was spot on. He said what he needed to say, and he pointed out a little bit beyond his mission perhaps where directions are that we should be addressing, but he can't address those directions. So I think he did an excellent job in giving us a neutral perspective from outside the college.
So did it meet your expectations, and do you think we could have used the time that we had for that a bit better?
What could have been better? What would have made me even happier? If we had had a similar back-to-back presentation with a college financial officer, that would have been excellent. Since we've been asking for that for 5 weeks and it's not forthcoming, that's not going to happen. A really excellent point, which is being raised electronically at the moment, is Chris promised to post the figures in the slides. Given that we have a very, very, very tight deadline to get any submissions on school finances in, we need them to be online yesterday. As of 2 p.m. today, they're still not yet online. It would be good to get them. During the actual hour-and-a-half session there, if we're engaging with the Chief Financial Officer from the Chancellery, which we were, I think that was spot on what we should have achieved. I think it worked really well. He answered questions as much as they were within the purvey of his experience very, very nicely. He called on other people to attempt to answer questions when the questions were clearly not something he could engage with. And I think Chris acquitted himself very well.
So talking about the model that Chris proposed a little bit more in detail now, do you think that other things could be cut, as opposed to salaries of teachers, which will affect all this education so much?
Can I take this question a little bit broadly?
Yeah, please.
Okay, because this is the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
Qualitatively, we had two very important points. The point about the language subsidy being essential, and whatever the other one was. There was another point.
The other one was the cap tax.
And the cap levy, to be neutral. Quantitatively, there was a very, very interesting picture. When he first showed us slides, here's your income, here are your expenditures, none of the details, but here's the overall picture. I got alarmed and I started nudging Ussie, who was sitting next to me. The reason I got alarmed was the income they were listing for us was over $1 million less than the income we believe we receive. But then the expenditures they listed were about $1.5 million below what we believe we're expending. Again, this is a neutral perspective. This isn't CHL constructing a budget or the college telling us what the budget is. Neutrally, from the Chancellery, they see this as the expenditures. And it turns out, using their numbers, we're not in the black, not in the red. Using Chris Granger's numbers, things are actually a lot more positive. Then Chris projected forward. Projecting forward, there's disaster. There's disaster because as soon as that central support for languages goes, that's a $2.4 million hit. That happens in 2019, and it falls and crashes. But what was interesting was comparing those numbers and some details in those numbers to the numbers that have been floated by the college. From the college perspective, we are already in the red. The college change management plan, the draft change management plan structure sees massive reduction in staff, which means in 2017 we're in the black because of lack of salaries, but then we fail to grow, and the enrollments modelling as just steady state. No one quits and goes somewhere else. Salaries increase each year. If enrollments don't increase, we sink and die. That's the college model. Chris's model, we're positive right now. When the language subsidy hits, we die. But we've shown that there is no future for the School of Culture, History and Language as we know it without the language subsidy. There is no point discussing a model without the language subsidy continuing. If we continue the language subsidy, 2018, 2019, there's no sudden crash and death. Chris's model also saw a massive increase in expenditure from 2016 to 2017. We're trying to chase that up. This seems, it's out of sync with all his other year-to-year increases. His increases are between 1% and 3%. 2016 to 2017, he modelled a 28% increase in expenditure. If we level that off, increase expenditure 5% each year, if we assume the language subsidy continues, Chris's model assumed 0 staff losses. Taking Chris's figures for 2015, 2016, assuming regular increase in expenditure, no increase in student numbers, no loss of language subsidy, this school remains in the black continuously. There is an accrued debt, that's true, from years past, but we've already been told that's just going to be cut and now we've got to be financially sustainable. Crucially, using Chris's figures, not the college figures, assuming the language subsidy continues and assuming regular, modest growth and reasonable increases in expenditure each year, the school is sustainable with 0 staff losses. So Chris's figures open a door to a potential in which there is no impact on teaching because no one loses their jobs. That's the quantitative point, which I think was very, very dramatic yesterday.
So I heard you've got an alternative model to these sort of change management plan that we have. Would you like to explain?
Well, it's really not even an alternative model. Various of us have been, let's backtrack. Another very interesting point Chris Grange made yesterday, which I thank him from the bottom of my heart. I forget the exact quote, but he said, the school must have an academic plan. If there's going to be a new structure or even an old structure, you have to have an academic plan. Veronica Taylor's draft change management proposal has no academic plan in it. There are many buzzwords, vibrant future, but there's no plan for how this vibrant future will be achieved. If the academic plan is to keep doing what the Vice-Chancellor, Brian Schmidt, has said is excellent and arguably the highest approval ratings across the university, then to maintain that, that means you change as little as possible. And this was in fact a recommendation in the external review that was conducted last year. Don't change this, it's working. What alternatives would we propose? Leave everything as is, believe in Chris Granger's figures completely, and right now let's negotiate for support for languages to continue rather than disappear, or rather than have to be renegotiated in 2018. If we can commit right now, if we assume modest and steady increases in expenditure and an even less dramatic increase in income, things remain constant. So rather than propose a new plan, let's propose the existing plan with the figures that come direct from the Chancellery, rather than relying on a very short-term solution, which is being proposed at the college level, whereby we balance the books in 2017 and we don't care what happens in 4 years' time.
Yes, I guess any other comments you wanted to make? I don't have any more questions.
The comments, that's not a result directly of yesterday's April the 7th meeting, but the process as a whole is the lack of transparency we've been faced with. Students, staff, professional staff, PhD students, no one has seen a complete picture. And Chris began his talk yesterday by pointing out that we've been offered financial figures many times. That's true, but they change every time, so it's very hard to know which financial figures to go with. If we had seen Chris's figures a month ago, a year ago, like obviously he couldn't give us the 2016 figures a year ago, but he had the 2015 projections. If we'd seen them, we could have been working together with management to come up with a solution to the accrued debt. Using Chris's figures, using Chris's acknowledgement that without continued support for languages, we're just going to have to go through this all again in 2 years' time. Using modest but steady increases in expenditures each year, there is no crisis. Transparency would have prevented months and months of angst and what has already been irreparable damage to the reputation of the work carried out here.
So, do you have any suggestions for us as student bodies of what we can do from now on to try and support you guys in stopping these language cuts and continuing just for languages in the future?
I bumped into Chris Ballard in the corridor yesterday and we swapped grimaces. Chris Ballard is the Associate Dean for Education in the school and he's a member of Culture, History and Language. Associate Dean for Education at the college and is a member of Culture, History and Language. And he said that one thing that's been very positive is the sense of cooperation and working together that's come up. So everyone, professional, academic, undergraduate, graduate, everyone is amazed at how everyone is pitching in here. There's very little internal fighting going on. None. Everyone's working out. What do we do in the future? We continue to ask for transparency. It's not a big request. It's not specific to this case. I think something that's very important is to continue to let other people know that this review process is deeply flawed. This review process has been described by Brian Schmidt last month as something in which, quote, we screwed up, unquote. Given this, should this review process run to completion as it's currently proposed? I think not. Yuka shakes her head with a clear no. What does the rest of campus feel? Is it okay for people in CAS, people in colleges of science, people in colleges of business and economics? Do they think it's okay for a plan which is flawed and has been acknowledged as flawed to still be run through? Or should there be intervention from the Chancellery to stop this kind of college-level mismanagement and this college-level misunderstanding of figures? It's a pretty poor state of affairs when a linguist can out-finance the college with a lot of support from the ANU's chief financial officer. But it means if we'd just been open about this earlier on, months and months of angst would have been avoided. So my message to anyone who wants to continue to support the School of Culture, History and Languages, just tell people what's going on. Tell people why it's going on and tell people why it shouldn't be going on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for this opportunity.